Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the Modern Brewer Podcast with me, your host, Chris Lewington. Today, we're embarking on a journey across the globe to one of the most dynamic and fascinating beer markets, Asia. I studied economics before I made the wise decision to ditch a future mind-numbing but well-paid career in finance for craft brewing. So I am always fascinated by the unique challenges and opportunities that different regions present. Most of you will know I ran a brewery on a remote island in the Caribbean. If you didn't, I normally find a way of strong-arming that into the first minute of any conversation with anyone ever. But what this experience did teach me is that here in the Western world, we often take certain aspects of brewing for granted. Access to specific ingredients, established regulatory frameworks, logistics, and familiar consumer preferences. And in my career, I feel I faced a lot of challenges, but stepping outside the constructs of the UK's society and business principles was absolutely one of the most challenging. Everything you take for granted kind of gets thrown up in the air and you have to reevaluate even the basics of what you have done previously. In today's episode, we're going to uncover the intricacies of the Asian beer market with a focus on the biggest, China. We'll discuss if breweries can successfully get their beer sold in Asia, the pros and the cons of having it brewed locally versus exporting it, and the critical steps involved in making such a move. And for the brewers who are actually considering a career move abroad similar to the one that I did, we'll provide essential information on relocating and thriving in a foreign brewery environment. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to share with you a company that is top of the class in custom apparel printing for the brewing industry. I've been wearing their prints for nearly my entire brewing career. When it comes to custom prints and embroidery, we all want vibrant, precise, and durable merch. That's what separates your brand apart. And we have seen brewery merch move from something that's just sold out of the tap room on a Saturday to becoming a lifestyle clothing brand with significant revenue streams for breweries. So I'd like to introduce to you Fifth Column, the ultimate solution for all of your custom apparel needs. Whether your business is looking for promotional items or someone wanting personalized clothing, they've got you covered. High quality screen printing is at the heart of what Fifth Column does, offering vibrant prints that last. Their expert embroidery services deliver detailed and, most importantly, durable designs on a wide range of fabrics that can withstand the test of time, even in the toughest production environment. Now, something that's close to my heart. Fifth Column are committed to sustainable practices, using water-based inks and ethically made organic materials wherever possible. They actually have the largest range of ethically made cotton garments in the UK. This means you are getting high quality clothing and printing that isn't costing us the earth. Efficiency is key in their production process, ensuring your orders are completed and delivered on time every time. I have used Fifth Column for years, and they never missed a delivery for us, not once. Plus, with their efficiency comes highly competitive pricing. Their experienced team, with years of passion and dedication, ensures that every project meets their high standards. And if you're planning on a large order for an event, corporate gifts or merchandise, Fifth Column's bulk order discounts make it even more cost effective. Fifth Column serves local businesses in the UK, but if you are an international listener, don't despair. They also serve a range of international clients, a testament to their ethics, quality, and customer service, which has seen this garment and printing company continue to grow since 1977. Which, when you think about how much that industry has changed since then, it's quite incredible. And get this, the team at Fifth Column are offering you, the listeners of the Modern Brewer Podcast, 10% off your first order. So if you're ready to take your custom apparel to the next level, visit their website at www.fifthcolumn.co.uk. There's also a link to Fifth Column's website in the show notes. All right, now let's get back to the show. I am thrilled to be joined by an expert brewing consultant who has extensive experience working in Asia, particularly in China. And for anyone who uses LinkedIn, they will be familiar with a legend that is Neil Playfoot. Neil will share invaluable insights into the Asian beer landscape, from market entry strategies to sourcing equipment and everything in between. And as someone who has personally gone through the shift from Britain to Asia, he will tell you exactly how you can make the same move. This episode is packed with critical information for any brewer looking to expand their horizons and explore new markets. All right, listeners, let's broaden our horizons and learn more about the Asian beer market. Welcome to the show, Neil Playfoot.
Thank you very much, Chris, for having me on. We've been speaking for quite a long time, and it's finally actually kind of meet face to face through the internet as well. So yeah, thanks again for asking me on.
I've only seen your face on LinkedIn many times, and that's about the only thing I've seen of you. So it's actually really cool to see you in real life, as you said. But I mean, look, for the listeners who don't follow you on LinkedIn, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and your fascinating career so far.
Sure, thanks, Chris. So yeah, my name's Neil Playfoot, originally from the UK. Now I'm based in China, in Changsha, which is Hunan province, which is at the center. First came over here in 2011, be here to brew. Like I say, I came over for a venture, I ended up with a family. So I've got a wife and daughter now, so kind of made my life out here. I'm brewing for a number of years out here in China. And then eventually COVID happened, and I was like, wasn't really sure what was going on. Everything was a little bit of state in flux. So whilst I was quarantined in a hotel, decided to set up Asian Beer Network. And now what I do is help people, I consult. So if people want to buy equipment from China, I help them that, like work as a middleman in the sense that, I can help with communication. I can be a man on the ground. And then also just still working with breweries in China as well. So if they want to help with processing and recipe creation and things like that. And it's just been the combination of working in brewing for 25 years around the world. I've been Bermuda, Armenia, and elsewhere. It kind of got to the point that I was long enough in China that I felt I knew the market and help people really. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 3-4 years with Asian Beer Network, really.
That's awesome. So what other countries have you brewed in?
So obviously I started off in London, then went to Paris, spent some time in Lisbon, then went over to Bermuda. And I know we were talking about brewing on islands and how it's hard with the humidity. And then spent some time in Armenia and then came over to China and done a bit of time in Hong Kong as well. So I feel lucky that I've had brewing allow me to travel around the world, but not just stay in one place for a few months. I actually live there, work with locals. Like for example, that I was spent about 18 months in Armenia, and that was getting a production brewery up and running because they had a brew pub, and that was teaching a team almost from scratch. Most of them didn't have that much brewing experience. They had some really great recipes, and I was just helping scale those up. But going in every day, working with them, they had a real nice community feel. Like we'd often on Friday evenings, we'd have a barbecue. Everybody was drinking beer, just outside and chatting, and just to be able to experience that, I feel quite, it's quite an honor to be able to appreciate and experience that, really. So brewing's been good to me in that sense.
It's such a fascinating career. And do you know, I think one of the most underrated things about being a brewer is it's a skill that is worldwide. It's not something that's really like specific to just one part of the world. You can take that skill and get a job in just about most countries in the world, which I think is really cool thing about brewing. That's one of the things that attracted me to sort of move abroad, was because I was like, I can do that and keep my expertise and, keep moving my career or keep doing what I love, and just in another position, like another country, which I thought was really cool.
The fact if you go to another country and they ask you what you do and you'll say a brewer, you actually have a lot more random conversations with people not even in brewing, because it starts it off as well. So it's kind of a really nice icebreaker as well. Because in China, there's lots of people are teachers and they see I'm British and they're like, oh, you're going to be a teacher. I say, well, actually, I make beer. And they're like, oh, really? So, and then it starts a whole new conversation.
Someone I know, James Forster, used to say, being a brewer's got like a real amount of social currency. So wherever you're at, as soon as you say you're a brewer, it's like, oh my God, it's like an interesting career instead of, I work in finance.
Yeah. You can see people that can kind of just register in their eyes. You make beer. Okay. This is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I agree with
Tell me
there.
more. And
Yeah,
then you get the
exactly.
ones who like like the older generation who was like, oh, so you just sit around and drink beer all day, do you? It's like,
Sure. What a glamorous
sure.
job. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That's what I do, sure.
Actually, it's 85 to 90% cleaning. It's really not glamorous at
Yeah,
all.
and then you just watch like the all the fun and joy just drain out of their face when you say that. All right, Neil,
Exactly.
let's talk about the Asian beer market. I mean, I completely appreciate it's a huge thing to talk about. So probably we start off by talking about China and the current sort of beer market there.
Sure. So China is, as you know, is 1.4 billion population, so it's huge. So cities are generally tiered. So like tier 1 to 4. Tier 1 cities are like Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, which most people know. And then you have tier 2 cities, which are the industrial cities. And most of them are like 5 million population. But a lot of people haven't heard of them, like Wuxi or Kunming down in Yunnan. Now, craft beer is mostly concentrated in those cities just purely because of the population, the disposable income. And domestic craft starts around about, I'm going to use dollars if that's okay. It's just easier for me to convert
Fine.
from RMB. About £3.50 for a domestic craft beer. And that can go up to about $14 in general. But we also obviously get a lot of imported beers. And they usually start about $4 and they can go crazy up to like $30 for a glass of beer. And
Ooh.
that's purely because some of this stuff is actually cold chain from the US. So it's got to be cold chain all the way through and then it will come through. And you can get some really interesting beers over here that's, not pasteurized in keg, but unfortunately you're going to have to pay for it, especially if you're in Shanghai at one of these bars. But I mean, that's unique. I mean, in general, true craft is probably still 0.5% of the market in China. Now, you might hear 2 or 3%, but that's usually because they include like Vedette or Goose Island, which not necessarily is what we would call true craft. But obviously, in China, it still comes under the craft banner when you consider it to, well, AB InBev, Duvel, Qingdao, and Snow, which are the two main large macro breweries over here. So China makes like 34 billion liters of beer a year. And the vast majority of that, it's going to be domestic lager, which is for about 500 ml bottle or can, it's going to start like 70 cents, probably goes up to about $1.70. And this is what the vast majority of will drink over here. And as I say, craft is still a very small part of it. And right now, the economy is in a bit of a state of flux. So what a lot of these bigger, more established craft brewers do, they work with distributors. So they'll sell to a distributor in Shenzhen, they'll sell to another distributor in Shanghai, and one in Beijing. And so through one particular distributor who was doing quite well, then what happens is, as as people are not spending as much money, there's been a call to try and reduce the price but keep the same quality. So what a lot of these distributors now are thinking is, why do I use another brewery? What if I just contract that beer myself? I'm the one with the clients. So they're kind of cutting out and they're going to go straight to source. So now there's brewers in China wondering what's going to happen. So it's kind of state of flux. Are we going to lose our distributors? Are we going to lose volume? And then I had another friend and he's making an IPA, put it into the plastic one-way kegs, and that comes in like at $83. And now he's been told by some of the people that sell his beers, the distributors again, that that's too high in price, that they can get it for less than that. And it's really hard for independent brewers to reduce that price below 600 because we're paying probably 35 to 50 for US aroma hops per kilo. So you can imagine it's kind of being really quite well squeezed over here.
Mm.
So at the moment, it's the economy is making everybody kind of readjust their focus and how they're marketing themselves to see how it goes in China. It's a little bit of a state of flux, just purely based on the economy here.
That's really interesting. So as you were saying that, I was thinking, why aren't distributors doing that here? because, as you said, from a pure business perspective, it makes a lot of sense for distributors just to contract the volume themselves. They'll definitely get it cheaper than what they would purchasing it. But of course, they wouldn't get the brand name attached to it. So are brand names as significant in China as they are in UK, or not so much?
I think in general, the education level of craft of people in the UK is definitely going to be higher than the average craft drinker in China. They know IPA, they know Imperial Stout, they know milkshakes, IPA, they know fruited beer, they know probably of one or two or three different brands, but it's quite harder to get brand recognition here, I would guess, because like England is much smaller than China, so there are good breweries in Chengdu, like in Sichuan, making good beer, but that doesn't necessarily relate to somebody that's in Xiamen, almost the other side of the country. For them, it's hard to, you know what I mean? Again, it's
Yeah.
kind of like the geography that makes it a little bit harder. And also, as I say, craft is still a very tiny minority, and the people drinking craft are still, it's still only a small fraction. And so it's harder to break through, because most people would have heard of in England of, Northern Monk, Verdette, Cloudwater. It's not going to be this. There are a few that have broken through to a certain extent, but it's not going to be to the same level purely just from a logistics point of view and just size.
Yeah. Really interesting. So what are the sort of growth opportunities? Are there any like parts of the beer market in Asia that are experiencing more growth than others?
Um, an interesting one right now would potentially be Thailand, because before Thailand, the laws were quite strict and it was pretty much sewn up by the big producers like Singer and Chang. And it was quite hard for anybody to get the licenses to be able to brew, even on a small scale. There was a lot of caveats to it. But now what we're seeing is the laws are relaxing. Brew pubs are still quite hard to get licenses, but if you persist with it, you should be able to get the license within 1 year, and people are starting to do that. And then I was talking to one of the suppliers, brewing equipment suppliers, and they were telling me that they've actually just sending out 100 hectoliter, 10,000 liter system to Thailand, which is, I was surprised to hear, because usually production breweries in Thailand are not allowed. It's hard to get the license, but we're seeing more of it. So that's going to be a really interesting one to see develop, because it feels like it's kind of brand spanking new. There are a few that have been around for a few years, but it's all kind of happening now, and it's the laws that are allowing it. And then you've got people actually importing into Thailand now, because there is definitely people that like to drink craft beer over there. So like Encanto of the Philippines, I know, are importing into the country. And so, yeah, I think Thailand could be an interesting one. And then the Philippines itself, you're seeing, because Philippines is a lot of small islands, not necessarily big population centers everywhere. You're seeing like 200 or 300 liter systems going up, and there's supplying the local community, but also supplying the local, what do you call it, tourists coming to the area. So, like for example, Corone Brewery it's really nice. Corone Brewery is actually on Corone Island, and it's quite a big tourist population. A lot of people, they go over there for diving, and yeah, I was just working with the Corone Brewery there, and it's been interesting. They've seen like the tourists come in first, and then now it's got interest from the locals. So it's kind of, these little centres are selling the beer, but also educating the locals, and it's starting to spread. And then Corone Brewery were doing quite well, and then you'll hear about, Corone Brewery did well. Why don't we do this on our island and see how that goes? So we're seeing it in Southeast Asia in general. There's, Vietnam is a little bit more established, because last year, I don't know, there was Brew Asia, and everybody went to Ho Chi Minh City for that. And that was kind of good to see Vietnamese beer showcased, because you've got Saigon and you've got Hanoi, and they've got breweries that have been established for, more than 5 years now, and they're all starting to do quite well and starting to grow. The issue with them is they're looking, maybe it's going to go up to about 100% tax in 2030, and that's another issue with,
100% tax.
yeah, because that's 60 now, which makes it really hard for some of the brewers over there. And what I think a lot of it has to do with drink driving laws in Southeast Asia. They're trying to crack down on it, and drinking in general. So there's kind of a balance that they want to have these industries, but at the same time, health and safety. So I don't know, Asia in general, it's kind of, there's lots of things going on at once. It's kind of hard to you know what I mean? There's lots of
Yeah,
little, something happens and then there'll be a counter reaction to it, and then something else. You know what I mean? And it's
I mean,
constantly improving.
it's a lot easier over here because, well, apart from the UK, but the European Union generally just dictates macro policy. So there's certainly nothing like that in Asia. So every country's doing things very differently, and there's a lot of countries doing things very differently.
Definitely, definitely,
uh,
yeah. So
what sort of beer styles are popular in Asia and China? I mean, you can talk about China specifically or Asia in general. Is it kind of the standard over here as well, the IPAs and stuff?
yeah, I mean, Asia tends to follow worldwide trends because a lot of the people doing the brewing are potentially expats still. Not necessarily so much in China these days, but in Southeast Asia, most of the head brewers, I would say, would be from Europe, UK, America. So, for example, like Heart of Darkness in Vietnam, they have 12 core beers, and four of those would be IPAs, and one of them is a pale ale. And, that's not uncommon. And then you'll have, for example, in China, Wild West, they purely just base themselves on hazy IPAs. And then if you go to
Hmm.
craft in China, IPAs are number one. Generally, it seems to be hazy IPAs in most places. Fruit beers do really, really well because Chinese kind of like beers that don't taste like beer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Although they're not as popular as they used to be, but they're just easy drinking, more approachable. Because obviously, Asian people in general, they might like bitter food, but having bitter in drinks is not necessarily a good thing as well. So for people that are not as well educated, they're drinking the IPAs, having something a little bit sweeter seems to be easier for them to make the beer approachable, or something they drink and say, "Oh, I kind of like." So for the fruit beers, you mostly see it down more south in like the Guangdong area, and like hazy IPAs, it's usually like Gen X and
Mm.
millennials that drinking. It's a lot of young professionals with a little bit of disposable income who then tend to have the money to be able to drink this craft beer, because if you go to a bar, as I say, if it's $5 to $6 to $7, it's not approachable to the average person that's working a 9 to 5 job in a
Mm.
factory. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and it's really interesting that still, even though, I mean, especially aroma hops being like what $35 to $40 a kilo, that hazy IPAs are still a thing. You think that would just price them out. Is there any sort of product innovation going on where people are trying to use things that aren't necessarily hops because of the price and to try to reduce that price down or the cost of production down?
There there've been a few attempts at doing this, and that's one thing I'd like to have seen China actually do more of, because we have a lot of, I'm saying we for China now. I've been here quite a long time.
Love that.
I kind of feel like attached to the Chinese brewing industry now because I've
Mm.
been here for quite a long time. I'm actually one of the oldest people to be doing craft beer in China, so kind
That's
of
wild.
feel part of it. So anyway, I would like to see China be able to do more, because we have like Chinese cooking. So we have all these herbs, we have all these vegetables that we have. Even crazy to think there's probably lots of interesting yeast out there, and everything else. But it's never been something that's been taken on. Like, for example, I made a beer with purple perilla, which in Japanese is called shiso, and it's used in cooking. And it's got kind of, it's like, it's part of the mint family, but it goes really well with citrus. So if you put that in a herbal hazy, I called it herbal hazy IPA. If you put that in, kind of could a good way to balance off if you're using like citrus hops. But
Mm.
what we do see is you'll see tonka beans sometimes used over here. You might see Szechuan pepper used over here and used in like a wit style of beer, because obviously the Szechuan pepper is the one that kind of numbs your mouth. That kind of works instead of maybe using pepper. But I'd like to see it more like taking like cues from like gin botanicals, which I
Mm.
try and do a little bit more in some of the work I do. I think botanicals and gin botanicals and stuff that you can potentially find in China could be useful, but we're not really seeing that. But as I feel like China and some of the brewers in China are definitely getting more of their own voice. So the hope is in years to come that maybe Chinese brewers will explore that in more detail and, and see if we can get something that's a little bit more unique to the region.
It makes a lot of sense. It was just interesting when the cost is so much higher that still the brewers are still following the trends of the macro trends of craft beer. For someone who's listening to this thinking, I'd like to get my beer into Asia or into China, like, of course, I imagine there's going to be a lot of challenges, but what are the sort of primary challenges that they'd face when entering the Asian market? And have you got any sort of have you seen any strategies that have really worked?
It's really, really hard to get into China. Again, as I say, it's people you have to try to understand the culture, people's drinking preferences, and basically the vastness of the country itself. It's like, imagine Europe and trying to go into Europe, or try and go into somewhere twice as big as the United States with 1.4 billion population. It does prove its own challenges. And I was speaking with a friend of mine, Sean, from the Sad Gorilla Club, and he tries and helps people come in, smaller breweries come in. And he was saying he would expect if you're going to do small concept marketing, so you're going to do small activations and a bit of guerrilla marketing, just try and concentrate on a few big cities, you need to spend or lose maybe $140,000 in the first 12 months just to even try and get into that market. And for a lot of breweries, that's quite a lot of money to be spending. But over here, you need to get people drink your beer first. And then if they like your beer, they're going to tell it to other people. People are not necessarily going to drink beer themselves so people rely on their social networks or on their familial networks to get, recommendations. So you need to get in people's minds and a few people's mind and then kind of build it from there. You kind of have to have a strategy, start in one city, then maybe try and go to another city. And most people also work with a local partner here when it comes to the distribution. So the best thing is you have to try and find a local partner, and that can be quite hard. I mean, even Brewdog, when they wanted to come into China again, they ended up pairing with AB InBev to help them with their distribution. So
no way.
I
missed that LinkedIn post.
So it's finding the right partner. So if anybody wants to come over here, you have to try and meet different people. It's the hard part, but sometimes you'll have people come and meet you, but you have to come over here. You'd have to spend some time here yourself. Definitely pay for some data, pay for some metrics. Just spend some time traveling around, get an idea for yourself how the market works, and trying to figure out how you're going to get beer in people's hands. And there's lots of demographics in China, which is going to be the best demographics for your brand. You just register your brand, come out here, look for partners, understand the culture, understand the vastness of it, try and formulate a plan. Do you start off in one particular area? Do you start in a couple of cities rather than concentrate on China as a whole? Because I think if you try and concentrate on China as a whole, you're going to take on a bit more than you can chew. So it's just one that you have to be here yourself. Like people say to me that what's China like? And I said, you have to come here yourself and see for yourself and see if it's the right place for you, because it's not going to be the right place for everybody. I mean, there are a few brands like Treehouse that have done well over here, but they kind of do it almost on a scarcity thing. They only bring so much, so they can charge a premium for it. So there's different strategies that work. It's just trying to find the right strategy that works for you, I would say.
So like the classic exporting model, I would guess, in the craft beer industry is you find, let's say we wanted to export to country X, you'll go find a distributor in country X, sign a deal with them, and they would lead the marketing, the promotion, and you would just basically supply them beer. Does that kind of model not exist generally in Asia? Is that not really the role of the distributor?
It is, but finding the right one is really difficult, because what I find is there's a lot of distributors, they'll bring in a beer X from this country, say, look, we're going to support it. But what they'll do is they'll get a container of it, but they don't really do too much to shift it. They don't go on the marketing end of it. And then it will sit on their shelves and they'll be like, oh, that one doesn't work. And then they'll go to the next brewery and say, hey, we want to try it. That's what I'm saying. You have to come over here. If somebody comes to you and says, we want to market your beer, say, great, we'll come out. We want to see what you do, what you've done with other people in the past, and then do it that way. Because that way, if you're on the ground, I mean, coming to China, it's not going to cost as much as shipping a whole container of your beer over there and have it sit on the shelf and not sell.
Mm.
You kind of have to invest in yourself and go over and spend time there first to see if you can work with that supplier or if you think your beer will do well in China before just sending beer to some distributor who can promise a lot of things, but not necessarily is in a position to push your beer to the right places. And necessarily they don't understand the beer that you're making well enough to find the right people that want to put it into their bars or into their shops.
So another route that people try and expand into other countries is getting their beer brewed by a local partner and then sort of circumnavigating a lot of the costs. So is that an option in Asia or in China?
As I say, yeah, it's kind of something that I've been getting into recently. So I'm working with a brewery in Changsha that actually does contract brewing, and we're seeing that happening more. I'm literally talking with a brewery in Southeast Asia that wants to actually make the beer here. So what you'll find is, yes, you can do it. Yes, it can be cheaper. From the point of view, utilities are cheap in China. The cost of electricity is cheaper. The cost of labor is cheaper. And obviously a lot of the packaging, bottles, cans are all made in China. So obviously the price of that is cheaper as well. So as I said, one of the things is the cost of materials can be more expensive if you're importing malt and hops. So that can be in the price. There's a bit of a balance there. So you kind of have to balance it with, yes, you can potentially make it cheaper and get it to the market in China cheaper and have it fresher. So potentially larger margins with fresher beer. But then at the same time, there's a trade-off. People will pay a premium for imported beers because they think, I mean, still China is China, and still for a lot of people, if it's made somewhere else, because China is not known for its craft beer as much as other countries. So like the US is famous for craft beer. Potentially we get a lot of Australian beer that comes in, UK beer that comes in, and they're like, oh, this is made in England, so this still is going to potentially be better than local craft because that's the way they see things. If things they kind of, there's lots of brand recognition and international brand recognition that can come in. So it's kind of a trade-off, making it easy here, but then are people going to buy it because it's not imported, because it's actually made locally in China? And that's actually Goose Island, when they switched from importing it from Chicago, making it in Chicago, then to brewing it locally. Obviously, they had some of that same kind of issues that, this is brewed locally. No, it's not brewed from Chicago and coming in. So there was a little bit of, they had to remarket themselves.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point. Definitely didn't consider at all was that you lose that importing tag, which actually has that will be a premium product because it's imported. I never would have thought. That's really interesting. It feels like surely the local partnership route would be better for the quality of the beer. Unless you're cold chaining it. But as you said, as soon as you start cold chaining from America to China, it's basically $30 for a glass of beer, which probably doesn't make it very economical for a lot of people, as you said. I'd love to talk a little bit now about how people can work in Asia. So we talked about how a brewery can expand into Asia, but taking it down just to the brewer personal level, how can someone who's listening to this podcast thinking, I want to go do what Neil's done and go travel the world and brew beer, how does someone go about getting a career in brewing in Asia?
Yeah, so I've been brewing in Asia since 2011 now. I'm talking to China because most of my experience is in China. It's a little bit, there's less opportunities now in China, purely because when it comes to the craft brewing side of things, there's much more local expertise. Because a lot of these expat breweries, they've been brewing for a number of years. They've been training up local brewers, and it's got to the point that these local brewers have been head brewers, and now they're teaching the local brewers. And 10 years ago, it was a bit of a golden time because the cost of brewing in China, or cost of living in China wasn't so high, and we were being paid quite well. But those kind of opportunities are less so here. But there are definitely opportunities, like in some of the bigger breweries like AB InBev or Duvel, because Duvel have heavily invested into, a lot of those management positions are now by, people from Europe, people from America. So there's definitely those opportunities. There's still opportunities in craft brewing, in the production breweries. And most of the production breweries here, the craft level are like 50 and below, so 50 hectolitres and below, so 5,000 litres. And so if you want to come out of here, it's kind of hard to find these jobs. It's really kind of word of mouth, a lot of these jobs, to try and find them. So you kind of having to start making friends with brewers in Asia and just kind of networking around and kind of put your name out there. So, if anybody's ever really interested in doing it, definitely they can get in contact with me. I don't know if you can put my details
I can.
in the, yeah.
Yep.
I would say right now in Asia in general, there's definitely opportunities coming up in Southeast Asia. For example, Bali. There's been several smaller production breweries going into Bali, and they've all looking to get an expat brewer, either on the management side or high level in their brewing crew side. And, sometimes if you're on probrewer.com, you'll see them. But again, a lot of those you just kind of have to be word of the mouth. And then you'll find, weirdly, what you find is there's a lot of German brewers that end up in Asia and also in Africa. And it seems a lot of those are actually advertised on German websites. So if you can actually get on German websites like Domans have a Facebook page, and they will post lots of jobs on there. And every now and again, they're probably working with an Asian brewery, and then you'll actually find jobs for Asia posted on there.
So cool. If you can share that link with me, I'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can check that out.
So it's just kind of word of mouth. And if somebody's really interested in coming to Asia, there's Brew Asia this year, which should be in October in Singapore. So if they're really serious about it, get yourself over to Singapore and start networking. And then if you're over there, then obviously you can get a feel for it for yourself. It's just putting your name out there, searching on LinkedIn, as I say, these random German websites that you can go on. It sounds nice to come and brew in Asia, and actually I really enjoy it. Obviously, it's completely different lifestyle, different culture and everything else. So, for example, if you're in Thailand, if you're asking a question, you don't want to try and tie them up. So it's just an either a yes or a no answer. Put people on the spot. It's not the done thing and people don't like it. So the way you kind of communicate with people potentially has to be different. It's just like these small little things that you kind of have to be aware of. And as I say, you're being observed in Southeast Asia or China as well. And bear in mind, you're coming in as a different culture. So they're all there. There's definitely lots of eyes on you to see because they're going to compare you to how they would work as well on a different level and how you react. It's kind of interesting because you can see them. Because Chinese people, sometimes you think they might be kind of cold, but it's completely opposite from the truth. It's just they're sussing you out at first. And once they suss you out and they think you're okay, they can be some of the most kind, lovely, generous people in the world. And also, again, in Asia, sometimes their way of communicating is quite different, maybe a bit like the Dutch, where it can be very curt, very open. Because Chinese in general it's not very flowery language. It's like, I want this. Can you do this? So if they're talking to you, it might sound like they're being rude or trying to command you or something else. But they're not. It's just that's how they speak in their language.
I guess that's like kind of the fun part of working abroad, though, is learning new cultures, learning how to fit in new cultures. I mean, there's always an inherent risk with moving abroad. It's quite daunting at times, especially when you've got like family and friends in your local area, and then you're moving to a completely different part of the world. It's quite daunting, I guess, but also really exciting. So it's good to know that that's kind of how you can go about it, is basically making connections and, finding random things on Facebook groups. I've got to admit, like, that's the big, for me, I didn't even think about it until someone brought it up. But when I got my job in the BVI, I applied for it on this website. I think it was brewingjobs.com, which is, I don't actually have never seen it before. And I applied for it, had a phone conversation, and then was basically doing my visa application the 2 weeks after. And like at some point someone was like, has it dawned on you that this could be a scam? And I was like, do you know what? It absolutely hasn't. I booked my ticket and I was like, I've never met these people. My contract is basically written on a piece of scrap paper, and like it basically just says I have a job. And I was like, none of this. I mean, all of this could be so illegitimate. It's only when someone really pointed out, I was like, oh, yeah, you're actually right. It could be like that. But it's actually even funnier because I ended up, when I landed, it was night because there's some delays. And it
Right.
was like pitch black because it's an island. And
Mhm.
I walked off the aeroplane through the extremely small airport. I mean, it was like a landing strip and a shack. And then we came out and then we walked down the road into this bar, had a couple of beers, and then we got onto a speedboat to go to this island, and it was
No
pitch
way.
black, like pitch black. And that was the only point where I actually was on this boat going, well, I could be going anywhere here. These people seem nice. I'm sure that's how they get you. But yeah, but I feel like that's like literally part of the adventure. That's why it's so fun to go and do these things
Amazing
abroad,
story.
because it's just like, yeah, you end up with these kind of wild situations that wouldn't really happen in your day to day.
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is if it's hard and you get over there and you say, I don't like it, I want to leave, give it 3 months,
Yeah,
because there's a hump. There's a hump
yeah,
where you're not uncomfortable. You don't really know anybody. You feel out your depth. It's a foreign country, so everything's different, and then you feel uncomfortable in your work environment because it could just be environmental or whatever. And then, but you just need to give yourself 3 months, and then usually you'll find yourself, oh, actually, it's not too bad, and then you just slowly ease into it, and then before you know it, you've got friends, you're hanging out, you're doing
yeah.
it. It's just those first 3 months, just even if you hate it, and give it 3 months, and if you give it 3 months and you still hate it, then go. But and then at least you said you've given it a good go. You don't want to go for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and say no, I don't like it, and then come back to regret it.
I feel like
That's
that
the
is
worst.
absolutely exceptional advice, because I've been through that probably twice, where it's like, a month in, I'm like, what have I done here? This is really like, this is too much. Too many changes. I had a good established network of friends where I could just easily go and hang out with. I don't have that now. I've got to earn it all again, start from nothing. And then, but yeah, that 3 month rule is golden, because if you leave in the first 3 months, I think you'll always regret it. Whereas I think if you left for like 6 months or whatever, and you're like, I really don't enjoy this, you can leave with no regrets. But the first time when I lived in America, I almost left like this close to leaving, and then it ended
Mm.
up changing my life, because that's where I sort of fell in love with craft beer. That's where all my best friends in the UK now come from, and I've got loads of friends in America, and I was like this close to leaving. And I was looking at flights, I was like, I don't want to be here. And yeah, it changed my life. So I feel like that actually, from my experience, as soon as you said that, resonated really, really hard. I think that's great advice.
That in Bermuda, my boss was the one who told me, it's like, just give me another month, because I was like, "Ugh, I can't do it. I just couldn't do it." And then I was like, I stayed there for 2 years, left because I had some family commitments, and then I went back for another 2 years. So the I still call him boss now, and I still talk to him from time to time.
That's
And yeah, like you say, I came close as well. I can really, I can feel with that. It's a hard one, but just stick with it. If anything says it, just stick with it, and then you can always phone up your friends or family. It's easier now with video calls and stuff. And
yeah,
if you just need to talk to somebody, just talk with somebody. And I'm sure your friends are more than happy just you know talk to you if you're just feeling a bit lonely or you're just a bit. It's just a bit, yeah. There's just reach out and then just try and stick with it. That's all I'll say.
yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, it wouldn't be an episode on Asia and China if we don't briefly talk over what should breweries know about sourcing brewing equipment in China, because it's a big topic. A lot of people want to do it. A lot of people try to do it. A lot of people are afraid to do it. So I know that's a lot of what you do, Niels, but if you could just give us sort of like a high level, like what breweries should be aware of when buying equipment from China.
Okay, the first thing I would say is if it seems too good to be true, it generally is still. I mean, I work with suppliers and I trust those suppliers, and there's lots of good suppliers that are out there, but there are still, unfortunately, some equipment manufacturers that aren't so good. So what I'd say is if that fermentation vessel is looking quite cheap, potentially some of the key parts are going to be 304 stainless, but some of the legs or other stuff could be 206, and they'll start to rust after a time. So yeah, just trust your gut with some of the stuff that's out there. And then it's what you need to do is you have to be really, really detailed about everything you do. Like, for example, a lot of the companies I've worked with in the past, not necessarily now, is like Lauter dimensions will be way off. So for the small 500 litre brew house, the dimensions of the kettle and the dimensions of the Lauter ton are going to be the same. So the bed depths are going to be too high. So like, for example, a good supplier will be asking you, what is your average Plato, or what's your average grain bill? And then, how much liquor to grist ratio you're going to do, because then that will simple things like getting your bed depth right is things you need to do. And a lot of stuff doesn't come standard, like a hop strainer before the heat exchanger, so you can protect your heat exchanger. So what you need to do is you need to figure out exactly what you need. Then you need to go through the whole brewing process as you see it. Then, because this is what I do is I work with a client. I say, what do you want? What's your scope? How much volume do you want now per month? How much volume do you want in 2 years per month? And then sit down, write it all out, all your equipment list, then put it together, equipment list. Then you have to kind of make detailed notes about everything and why you want this, this, and this. And then, for example, I want to oversize my glycol chiller because I want to add phase 2. I want to add more fermenters. And then you have to say, like, as you go through the process, okay, then I need to make sure I've got water mixer station here. I've got my hop strainer here. So you need to fine tune anything, because if you assume something's going to happen, you could be in for a lot of trouble, because it's not necessarily going to happen. I mean, a lot of these companies do have brewers on staff and have knowledgeable engineers, but they're not necessarily going to do it in the same way as you do it. So, for example, some Chinese brewers, they're not going to cool down their whirlpool hops. So they don't think about having a tubular heat exchanger or a mini heat exchanger between the kettle and the whirlpool. So you have to kind of list out exactly what you need. And then once you tell them you want it, you say, well, actually, I need to take it down to 70 or 80 degrees or whatever you need it at by this amount of time to do it. So you kind of just have to really break everything down in detail, and then go back and forth and make sure that's properly understood by everybody. Almost kind of have it to repeat it back. And then sometimes I even have to go to the point where I might make small diagrams, so everybody, like my client understands, the equipment producer understands, and everybody's like, okay, I get the concept now. So yeah. And then what I'll do is you'll end up having quite a lot of conversations, and I find like email chains can get lost. So what's good I find is you have a live Word document, maybe a Google Sheet, or you have the Google Word document. I don't know what that is.
Google Docs.
And then what you can do is Google Docs, yeah. And then what you'll do is you can have different colors, and then as people add more, they can go underneath, and then you can follow that chain for every individual part. So if you start talking about the Lauter ton, it has to be this bed depth. Then it's like, what's the support structure like? How many rings, how many points are we taking off? And then, you know what I mean? Then you can keep adding to it. And then eventually you've got a document with a Lauter ton that it needs to be this bed depth. I want to take from 4, 5, 6 ports and that kind of stuff. And then it's kind of just a gradual process. But they're not going to ask you. You have to tell them how to do it to make sure you get what you want. That was what I would say is the biggest thing. And then, so it's 3 forms of communication. You have your Excel doc where you've listed it all out. You have your live document. And then for quick chats back and forth, you might have to use WhatsApp as well. So it's kind of, communication is just really, 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 really key over here, is what I would say. And then work with your suppliers, and then repeat back to people and say, did you understand that? And they're like, yeah, what did I, sometimes you have to see, like, what did I say? Did you understand that? And go back and forth just to make sure that is. But then you do get points where you can check it, because you'll end up having your technical diagrams, then you'll have your PID, you have your piping layout. But once those are all agreed, it's very hard to then go back. You know what I mean? So try and be as prepared and cover yourself as much as along the line. Again, it makes sense to come out and visit 3 or 4 suppliers that maybe potentially you've been speaking to. Go to their factories, speak to them. Also ask them to give you testimonials or allow you to speak with previous clients if you can. Even that price of coming to China is still going to be offset by the total cost.
Yeah, really interesting. I guess for people who don't have, let's say, on-site engineers or process design people who can't really truly design an entire, let's say, brew house, for example, system, then that's why they would go to a company who have those people who would then go to manufacturers elsewhere and get those made to those specifications. But if you wanted to skip that process for the cost saving side, then you need either someone in-house or someone like yourself who could act as that person to design the things as well. Is that something that you offer?
Yeah, I do. As I say, it's a lot of communication go back and forth. So if people come to me, I start off with like an initial 13 question document so I can get initial idea of scope. And then from there, once I've answered that, we'll go back and forth on email a few times. And once I feel like I've got quite a good understanding of what they do, then what I'll do is I usually jump on a call, because what I wanted is I want to be partially prepped. So when we actually have that initial call, where we know roughly we're on the same page, and then that allows us to be quite productive when we're chatting. And then it's asking the questions like finding out what do they need? Do they need what temperature they want to take their whirlpool down to this? And then once I understand all the technical aspects of what they need, then we all can together, we can speak with the engineers and then get that done. And then before anything gets done, we can put those into drawings, and then we can make sure those drawings are all right. So when it actually comes to the fabrication's as the drawing. So it will, you know what I mean? The plan is, with the prior preparation and planning, we'll have the equipment that is needed once it comes to the end of the fabrication, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
So just with my experience in brewing over a number of years on different equipment, it's just given me a lot of insight into what's needed from the technical and equipment point of view, and also doing this as my day job now for a number of years. I've kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're well versed in it. Instead of
Yeah.
what someone's might be doing every 10 years, you do it, every month. So
I
you
dream
can get that
about piping diagrams sometimes.
Yeah.
It's really
Neil, my final question for you: how do you see the Asian beer market evolving over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? So quite far.
It's kind of hard to take Asia as a whole, because different parts of Asia are at different points of their craft journey. So I would have said China was quite far advanced at one point, but it seems to have stagnated a bit. But China and Korea, there's definitely a good craft beer scene. There's lots of craft breweries. And then you would go to, say, Thailand, which is maybe 5, 6 years behind, 7 years behind. And then maybe you go to the Philippines, which again is further behind. So it's kind of like layers on layers. And then obviously finding in the future, in the next 10 years, how quickly will some of these markets develop? Because, in Asia, things can happen quite quickly. If there's enough interest, and there's enough tourists going into Thailand could just kind of take off if the regulations are there. So in general, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and I would see that you're going to see a lot more smaller breweries becoming established, and then, like, say, for example, in 10 years' time, we will probably have a lot more craft production breweries that are doing to a certain amount of volume, and then maybe some of these Asian breweries you'll see them going over to the UK, maybe going over to the US, and that would be something I would like to see. You see it a little bit now. I don't know if you've just seen it, but Siren in the UK has just done a collaboration with 3 breweries: Maheen, Wild West, and Bravo. And that's going to be, I think you might see a bit of more of that. So each other brewery can potentially move into the other's market. Because I know Guilo did that with Vocation, I think it was, before as well. So I would hopefully like to see that there would be some Asian brands that maybe develop and start to get more recognized on the international stage. And probably one of the most interesting ones for me right now is actually the Indian craft beer scene. It seems to be coming back really well recently from COVID in this last year, because I think it really, really struggled through COVID as much as China. And Bangalore is a real center, but I'm seeing quite a lot of jobs where they're looking for quite senior people in brewing to go over there to work over expanding, projects to expand production breweries and so on. So I feel like India could be one of the ones that really maybe comes through more in the future. I think that could be an interesting one if
That's
that
a really
answers
good
it.
tip. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really good tip. I feel like I've seen that market, and I've had Anchor Napa on my podcast before. We
sure.
talked a
Yeah,
lot about the Indian market. Probably maybe some of that was off air, but yeah, really fascinating how it seems to be exploding a little bit,
yeah,
especially as you said in centers rather than the
yeah.
whole country. But yeah, really fascinating market, and yeah, I'm keeping my eye on it because I think it's really interesting. Neil, I mean, look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. There's so much insight in here, and I feel like for me, I probably didn't appreciate the Asian market as much. I didn't understand it. I think I had this lazy label of it was always growing. So it's really good to hear like sort of the real world, what's actually happening, and how brewers might be able to expand, and how brewers might be able to expand themselves into that market. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, yeah. Thank you for having me on. It's been fun. Yeah, as I say, I'm quite attached to the Chinese market. So, and to be able to speak about the Chinese and Asian market, it's given that platform has been really nice. So yeah, appreciate it and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Neil. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can remember to share the pod with a brewing friend or acquaintance or colleague, that would be awesome. It would really help me out and help the podcast grow. So thank you so much for your support. And as always, I will catch you on the next episode of